The last panel for the day. My name is Alexander. I represent UCR, and MetaPi is a carbon sequestration project. We are currently focusing on agro-industrial complex, however, very interested in opportunities in carbon transformations of other sectors. And together with the Click Foundation of Switzerland, we have designed this side event to review opportunities and hopefully put forward some ideas and approaches on how to tackle very prominent and topical issues in energy and green buildings or building sector. So I'd like to introduce our very distinguished panel, starting with representatives at national level. Olga from Ukraine. Olga is head of climate, climate policy, and Veronica from Switzerland. You're deputy head of international relations, correct?
International climate policy.
Okay, great. So then we have representatives at subnational level, Mykola from city of Khmelnytsky, and not least distinguished multilateral institution EBRD. You're from EBRD, Jan William, and Misha. So I open up with a question to Olga regarding priorities that Ukraine has in cooperation with Switzerland under Article 6. Can you please comment on how do you view this cooperation and what sectors would be priority for Ukraine?
Yes, works, I think. Thank you for the question, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. Always a pleasure to talk to people around you, knowing on the same topic, being on the same stage. I believe as a representative of the government, it's important on my behalf to say where we are now first, and then tell where we're moving and what we're planning to do together with Switzerland on this really interesting pathway to operationalize the Article 6 in Ukraine. I believe everybody who's here already have heard that we have an agreement between Ukraine and Switzerland, which was signed back in July. And for us, this agreement is a big step forward. And that really creates a massive, a big framework to operationalize Article 6 in Ukraine in terms of legal framework. There are many interesting components of this agreement, but one of the key aspects, which is very interesting for us and useful, is that it's neutral, it's technology neutral, it's project neutral, it's really broad. It doesn't specify any scope, so it would be for the two countries to decide where we want to go, which priority areas would be there and important both for the business, municipalities, and so on, and which would be important for both countries to move on with. Another important aspect is that we need to understand what is required in Ukraine to be established to make it work. And so far, we have started it with the support of UNDP, provided again as a body on behalf of the Switzerland. We are now trying to estimate and assess what needs we need in Ukraine, so make the needs assessment report. After we have it, we will understand what next steps we can take in order to make sure that all the procedures are consistent with both Swiss legislation, Ukrainian legislation, and the international framework here to be adopted on Article 6. And again, this is also a needs assessment on a technical point of view. It's an assessment on institutional point of view. So that's a big scope of work that we need to do to make sure that this all works. Another issue is that, not an issue, but a question which is of interest for many is the sectors and the spheres, which would be the priority ones. And we understand that as a Ministry of Environmental Protection, we like all projects that are aimed at greening. And for us, it wouldn't make a big difference which is the priority as soon as it is green. However, we understand that this is more of a cabinet of ministers level, so we need to talk to other ministries and identify what are the priorities for all of us, for the country, given that we have our new green recovery plan and the activities, all the plans and strategies that we're about to implement, they all have to be consistent with the recovery plan, which is the presidential initiative, and it is moving on and forward towards greening the whole country. Another important aspect that we want to, I probably say, tell to everyone and share our general vision of the operationalization of the agreement is that we see it that the development of the framework that is to be in Ukraine, it should be more of a broad one that would not be very much focused on one very particular sector or sphere or project, but it would build a platform that can be usable for different project types, for different scope, for different ideas, so that it would be more of a general platform legal framework that would allow for many to work on it. And I believe many of you also already know that there's Click Foundation from the Swiss side. I believe Veronica or Misha will tell more about it. And there's also a UNDP who works with Switzerland and now with us as well in terms of the implementation of projects. And for me here today would be very interesting to hear from representatives of business, from Khmelnytsky as well, and maybe from Jan Willem, who would say a lot about finance. So what kind of projects can be useful? Because we as the government are looking for those, and we want to see what is there, and we want the business to trigger all this work and provide us with really good and nice ideas that will be aimed at greening our country more and more.
Thank you. I have a question for Veronica of Switzerland. We know of this concept of high-hanging fruit that Switzerland prefers to have in projects that you get involved with. Can you please tell us perhaps of other criteria that you prefer to have in projects that Switzerland selects or authorizes?
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be on this panel. And first of all, let me appreciate this cooperation that we have entered in with Ukraine. We're very glad about the strengthened bilateral ties that come with this agreement and complement, of course, other cooperation that we have. So on this particular possibilities and opportunities this provides, from our end, as you said, we really want to provide a framework that triggers activities that are most suitable for the country. So from the Swiss government side, there is a few criteria that are out there for us to meet, like this needs to be clearly additional, would not have happened otherwise. There is specific things like large solar installations across the board with all countries that we do not authorize, but otherwise, this is being kept very flexible from the Swiss side, because what we believe is, of course, that the partner country in this sort of cooperation should be in the driving seat, guiding these the finance that comes with this cooperation into sectors or activities that benefit the economy and the society most. And for that, as you say, there is many stakeholders probably necessary to take this off the ground, to bring it together, come to a business model that also is going to work. We, from our end, we're very flexible on what these are. We're very encouraged by, the stakeholders already today at this panel, looking into what these activities can be. And we are very grateful of these excellent cooperation with the Ukrainian government, as well, setting the framework conditions there to enable this to happen. So I stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Veronica. So now I'd like to address a question to Mykola regarding initiatives at municipal level. Maybe you could briefly tell us about, what are you doing and what role does renewable energy have in the city of Khmelnytsky? What initiatives in solid waste, in RDF are you deploying? and how are you coping with current crisis?
Thank you for this question. I always say thanks God and Ukrainian armed forces that we are here today and we can talk about cooperation with Switzerland. Actually, Khmelnytsky is one of the not many cities that not actually saved the very good heating system, central heating system, but we actually modernized it and we made it bigger and better in last 10-15 years. Actually, Khmelnytsky has communal enterprise, Teplokомуненерго, and Khmelnytsky has the lowest tariff in Ukraine for the heating product. And right now, as many cities, we have a lot of problems with this system, not only because of war, but because of the gas price. And right now we're working on a few projects. First of all, this is the waste management project. We have agreement with the BRD, and we've been working with the BRD for this project about 3 or 4, almost 4 years. And we already announced a tender for building the MBT plant, and MBT plant, mechanical biological treatment of waste. It will produce RDF around 14,000 tons of RDF per year. So one way is just to sell it to cement factory, to Kamenets-Podilsky, it's about 100 kilometers away. Or the other way is to find out how we can burn it and how we can use the RDF, not Russian gas. That's a very big goal for us also. And the other thing is to make more boiler rooms with renewable sources, I mean the wooden chips. Right now, the situation is not very good. Only 3.5% of our boiler rooms are on the wooden chips. The other is on natural gas. So according to the price of Russian gas and all the situation with gas and politics, we understand the situation should be changed and we should move forward in making the boiler rooms with wooden chips and so.
Very interesting case. We are aware that your peers in regional cities of same population size are doing similar work in this direction. And now I'd like to ask Jan William a question as to what role can climate finance play to work together with the carbon finance in under Article 6 to help and channel more funding and scale projects with a view to reconstruct Ukrainian infrastructure and energy and in greening the energy infrastructure.
Good evening. Thank you for the question. And first of all, I want to congratulate Ukraine with what I think is the most Zen pavilion in the whole of the COP. Yeah, you have created, in spite of all the misery, you have created a very quiet place. Okay, except for the nature, but you can feel the Zen here. So I think that's very good, and hopefully that Zenness and peace will further spread. Because we need to get rid of this horrible conflict as soon as we can. So that being said, as EBRD, we're very active still in spite of all of the war, so to say. We are very active. The bank is providing a lot of liquidity at the moment to companies in Ukraine, in order to see through this difficult phase. The bank is doing that in a close cooperation with lots of donors. If a donor puts up a euro or a dollar, then the bank also, on our own balance sheet, is putting up €1 or a dollar. So we have a commitment up to 3 billion going forward. Obviously, considering everyone in Europe has waken up to our energy dependence, and I think that's even more important in the circumstances than the climate angle per se. But yeah, to reduce the climate the dependence, one can switch to biomass like you are doing. There are other types of renewables, PV systems that work on a decentralized function, and all of that have an enormous climate co-benefit as to reducing the emissions. So it's all, in fact, good stuff happening, although we were, in fact, quite advanced. Yeah, we did. By the way, the half of the people here have been working on the NDC update and etc. But we were very advanced with the Ukrainian NDC, improving it. Let's say we had discussions on support for an emissions trading scheme, linking that up to the eventually to the EU ETS and etc. So a lot of good stuff was happening, and then this disaster happened. Now, as to carbon finance, I think it. Well, there's one. Let me first say, we are. If you come to a transaction, I think our role is to try to leverage that transaction as much as we can. Yeah, that's the key one. So, because by leveraging, we invest more, we create a bigger market for investments. And so the areas I see where we can work, I know it's not in the criteria yet, but maybe for Ukraine you can have a look. It's, for example, the area of soil carbon. We do a lot of work with agricultural companies, and there's where the liquidity needs are at the moment in Ukraine. So that's one area. Yeah, you're also working in that area.
Yes, we are rolling out program for carbon sequestration, for CO2 sequestration in soil in Ukraine.
Yeah.
But that's beyond this theme.
Indeed, but if you look at where eventually you need to gear up the economy, yeah, and gearing up the economy means that you create wealth and etc., and then the other things can come to play. So that's an area that's fundamental, I think, for the rebuild of Ukraine. The other areas where colleague Nigel there, working with your municipality, is on the Green City Action Plans. There are 6, Nigel? 7. Okay, 7 municipalities we're now working on so-called Green City Action Plans, which is basically determining a low carbon pathway for on a city level, but then also connecting it to investment actions. And let's say, depending on the central government, maybe part of that reduction can be sold to parties like Click in Switzerland and others, so that you can accelerate basically that movement. Another example which we also are looking at in Georgia is to use our credit lines, so working through the local banking system in delivery of let's say loans for energy efficiency in buildings. So there can be double glazing, there can be insulation, can be upgrading small boiler systems. So there are a lot of opportunities. Of course, what is critical is that we can only do so much at the moment because, yeah, we saw the picture before this one, the bombs are still dropping, unfortunately. But once that stops, we now need to focus on getting it all shovel ready. Yeah. So when it all stops, we can inject also our investment capital for the long run, and then I think Ukraine can leapfrog, so to say, immediately into a very low carbon economy. And again, carbon markets, Article 6 can play an accelerating role in this development. Thank you.
Can I add?
Sure, of course.
Because I want to add something that we don't have to wait till the bombs will stop. That's the modernizing of the pipelines That's what we can do because we'll lose a lot of heat, right? A lot of gas because we are heating the land, basically, right? That's what we can do before and already again. And actually, I wrote down the other case that because of the war and that Russia began against Ukraine, we received new challenges with, I mean, all the boiler houses, they need to have some extra electricity and they have to be all individual. So all the systems should be in one circular. So that's the plan that we should work on right now. And then probably this one we have to do after the bomb will stop. But the modernizing of pipelines, we can do it even now.
Yeah, I definitely, any opportunity that can be done now, of course, we will have a look into that as well, because it's very clear with winter coming that the needs are short term, not long term.
Okay, finally, moving on to Click Foundation, Misha Klassen, perhaps you could add as to what role does Click play in this whole mix? How do we put projects together with national, municipal representatives and international climate finance companies?
So I'm very glad to be here in this panel and explaining the role of the Click Foundation. I think Veronica alluded to it already. The Click Foundation is basically the operational part in this partnership. It is indeed an organization that is obliged by Swiss law to provide a certain volume of emission reductions outside of Switzerland in various countries, Ukraine being among the partner countries. And therefore, we are also active in Ukraine. And basically, how it works is that we have a procurement process in the sense that our website is open to receive submissions and ideas, and these ideas will be then assessed by the Click Foundation and brought forward and support, like the working out, the development of the blueprint will be supported by the foundation, and ultimately the goal, of course, will be to have it authorized by Ukraine and Switzerland under the bilateral agreement going forward, and then we will buy basically the emission reductions, and yeah, that will secure the long-term viability of the project that without this money would not have seen the light of day. That's the basic concept. And when I say ideas, these are really larger structures that we were working on, as Jan Willem explained. In Georgia, for example, this is really a nationwide building program. We are really looking into bigger structures, also because in the end we need a certain amount or a certain magnitude to make this effort really work. And of course, we are very much interested in this long-term perspective, because we're not doing these projects for like a few years, but this is the goal is basically 2030 and beyond.
Thank you, Misha. So I'd like to conclude by suggesting that we all review, the case of Khmelnytsky and build several more cases with the representative of other municipal areas of Ukraine here, with a view to perhaps find more actors from private sector in Ukraine who are willing to contribute to greening of energy and building sector, and put forward these projects to our international partners like Click and EBRD. Thank you for your time. Oh yeah, sure, we have questions. Sanne Kisil from the Covenant of Mayors.
Covenant of Mayors Ukraine, and our initiative is working just now more than 200 municipalities, and of course just now we try to support municipalities in an emergency situation, but we are mostly focused on development. We are mostly focused on development of local energy and climate change plan. And I would like to say that we need to think about how to save district heating system in big and small municipalities, because without district heating system, I don't think that Ukraine will be more green and more clean, etc. It's the most vulnerability sector right now. And the second sector, it's water supply sector. Just now we have some change situation with mayors in Ukraine who are involved mostly in local energy planning. And we need to think about energy security for these both sectors, water supply and district heating system, taking into account how to use more local resources, alternative resources. That's why we need more technology, clean technology. We need some ideas, concept idea, because the main problem of municipalities is a concept idea related to energy security and local resources for water supply company and for district heating system. And that's why, of course, we need your support. But my question relating to Switzerland, to CLIC and to EBRD. I know that sometimes that to propose something, a finance program or donor program, it's take more time, not 1 year. 2 years to discuss concept. Are you ready to play more quick with our cities? Because we need money maybe in half of hour, and we need quick money. Municipalities are not ready to wait 2 years that to plan project and to sign contract, loan contract. We need quick money that to rebuild our critical infrastructure. Are you ready to be more flexible? And second question related to small municipalities, because Khmelnytsky is the best, Lviv is the best, Rivne is the best. It's a big municipalities, but we have Novograd, Volhynsky, and other communities, for example, started from 400 citizens, but they need investments too. Especially, I request to EBRD to change concept with financing to small or medium-sized municipalities. Are you ready to cooperate with such municipalities? Because honestly, they need just now more money than biggest cities. Thanks a lot.
So as a
well, maybe whilst Misha is thinking about, I pass the floor to Nigel, because he's much closer to the business than I am as to municipalities in Ukraine.
Thank you, JW. My name is Nigel Jolins, and I'm co-lead for the EBRD Green Cities program, which covers about 58 cities across our countries of operation, including 7 in Ukraine. And we have the pleasure to work with Khmelnytsky on investments and on the investment planning. Even now, during the conflict, we're still working with the city. To your question about support for smaller cities, under our board approval, we can work with cities with a population of 50,000 people and above. So at the moment, if your city meets that criteria and you're wanting assistance with environmental planning, because it's a green cities thing, but assistance in critical infrastructure, then please approach us, and we'll be very happy to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. That's a very practical answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, with respect to the CLIC Foundation and the process under the bilateral agreement, processes are a little bit slower still, because we are really at the inception. And it is very important to understand that the cooperation between Switzerland and Ukraine is not about financing projects that anyways are ramped up and basically up for implementation. The money that comes from CLIC is really bound to make a difference in going one step greener than it has been planned. And this is very important in the, also in the requirements. And this is also how or why the CLIC Foundation or the projects CLIC Foundation is supporting will be different. So we would be where, for example, in the smaller scale, or where there is no basically financing available, or technologies that are one step beyond of what a typical green project would be. But I mean, we will see in the end there is a huge it's a huge requirement in funds, and I think the CLIC Foundation will be really in the, I mean, yeah, in the, yeah.
Right, so you have more questions from the audience?
Hello, and thank you very much for having this discussion today. My name is Anna Ackerman from NGO Eco Action. Actually, I'm a Ukrainian based in Switzerland, so I also try to connect and see how things work in Switzerland. Together with different NGOs, now we look at the building sector, and we really would love to see how Ukraine would be rebuilding not just buildings according to the existing standards, but to much better standards. So near zero energy building standard, there is a great pavilion from the buildings initiatives here. And we were already discussing with construction companies. We were discussing with different experts from this sphere. And they of course say that, well, to build a better building that would be energy independent, energy efficient, again, a better class, so much better technologies than what we have in Ukraine and what we even know how to build, right? So really a better level, you basically need more money. So who's going to be investing that, and who's going to be investing that on the top, you know? So I'm wondering if this is something where we could have this first, I don't want to say pilots. I mean, I'm tired of this word, but in any case, so the showcase how it actually could work in Ukraine, that would be really wonderful. And especially as we're going to be competing with the time, because the moment we win, and already now, you know, the government is doing everything to easy the access for businesses to build better, quicker, and to build quicker. And we want to build better. So, you know, to looking how we can actually approach the standards as early as possible. So this is one thought. So I'm wondering if this could fit into your plans. And the second one, I think is also something, the area where we're looking at is all those lands which that have now contaminated soil. So we have a good showcase right here and just behind you also. Some of those lands would probably be cleaned up and become agricultural lands just as usually. But what about turning some of those lands back into protection areas? Because that would be also important for the climate. And this is not a nice business case. There's not much business around there, you know, but we want to, President at COP, President Zelensky saw how many forests burned actually in Ukraine. We need to restore that. So we are also questioning of how we're gonna be, if this could be also a case for, well, actually investment that would not pay out really, but it's gonna be about, again, extra CO2 emissions captured thanks to the new protected areas created. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I need to leave, but thank you all for your questions. And I leave the questions to Misha. But thank you very much.
So on the second question on the sequestration, the CLIC Foundation is bound to the scope of the framework, the cooperation framework, because between Ukraine and Switzerland, and the agreement is, although broad, but I'm not sure, but we are bound by also by the national law. And in the national law, we are, as I said, we are obliged to do it according to the national law, and in the national law, sequestration is excluded. So therefore, we are not able to engage in biological sequestration, but that does not mean that this is not a priority. It's just not covered on. It's really about the Exactly. Now, so biological sequestration, also forest, is outside of the scope of the CLIC Foundation for the reason I explained. Now, on what you said, building a green building, green recovery, and so on. So the whole Article 6 is about raising ambition, and this is also the core of the cooperation between the two countries, and also the core of the evaluation of the project. So we only provide funding for activities that exactly support the features that you mentioned. And of course, this will be expensive if you put it down per ton of CO2 mitigated, but we still have to see that this stays within the range of our willingness or possibilities to pay. So therefore, the evaluation of the project has a very central stage in the beginning, and is also authorized by both parties. And once this is done, implementation can start. As it typically takes 1 or 2 years at the moment, or 1 year. But up until on implementation, there will be also a certain time. So we are really at the inception of this operationalization of the cooperation, and things will expedite over time.
We could discuss the soil sequestration separately, because this event is focused on cities, but Veronica wants to add something.
Yes, I mean, just to complement, Misha has very eloquently already outlined a bit of the Swiss national framework, and to give it a bit more of a context. So this particular engagement is mobilized within the climate legislation of Switzerland. So it has to respond to all the criteria that are there from the climate logic, obviously the additionality, and there is some limitations, such as Misha said, to sequestration. So we see this as an opportunity for this cooperation. I think it's certainly a long-term cooperation that we are engaging in, and will hopefully drive long-term cooperational change, structural change and greening. We do strongly believe that if actors, come together, this can be hopefully implemented rather quickly. So it will also in the short term, hopefully come with all various co-benefits. But there's also limits to what these funds, how they can be used, just because the legal basis for raising them in Switzerland have a very particular purpose and some limiting criteria to it.
Thank you. So actually, this is really interesting. I didn't expect to be here this evening, as I'm a part of a project which is rebuilding one city, the Irpin city in Ukraine. So like seeing this local level approach is really interesting. But I actually have a question about the framework between Switzerland and Ukraine. So we know that Article 6 hasn't been not finalized. There are some things that are still open. I mean, there are literally negotiations going on right now. So how do you think this framework will work, given that there are some things that may change? How do you think to change the framework in accordance to these final points? In particular, for example, do you have this framework more ambitious than the basic level of Article 6, so that you are quite sure that any project will fall into the Article 6, or will you adopt them later eventually? For example, one specific point is the avoidance. So will this go into this framework? And last thing about the baseline. So we know that Ukraine, well, has changed a lot during this year because of the war. So of course, the baselines to consider, for example, for the additionality, well, they changed much since February. So will this framework consider pre-war situation, economy, and therefore the baselines, or will there be some new baselines in the approach? Thank you.
Okay, so we just said I will probably go first, then Olga will complement, of course. Okay, there were a few questions, so let me just remind me if I lose one. I might start from the very specific one on the additionality and the baselines. From our point of view, it needs to be for this Swiss narrative and raising the money. We need to clearly define that this would not have happened otherwise. And one very clear criteria is that anything that has funding otherwise, and now coming into Ukraine, of course, ourselves as well supporting, that we do not credit. Right? It needs to, as Jan William said before, it needs to do something additional, that turns out into mitigation outcomes. That is what our currency in this specific setup is. It needs to accelerate or needs to expand. It needs to be a top up, right? So that is certainly how I would maybe frame it right here. So we are on our end, we need to carefully look into this, but we are sure that there is these possibilities to synergize here with other financing sources and the carbon finance to top up on here and be beneficial. On the general framework agreement and the ongoing rules under the Paris Agreement, our bilateral agreement is in force. It sets rules, and the idea is here to give clear rules and legal security for the private sector to be able to take activities forward and do commercial engagement and investments. So they are very firm. We have also noted in our bilateral agreement that if this would be not compliant with any rules coming forward under the Paris Agreement, we have expressed willingness to amend the agreement. But as they are in force and they are operational and provide that legal security for all actors to invest. Let me also note here that we are trying to do this in a manner that is very integer. So we, of course, strongly hope that we will not get into a situation where we would not be compliant with any provisions. We have the major rules of the game, particularly for the 6.2, have been decided at the COP last year. So we expect actually that we're quite within the frame. But of course, you would have every willingness to amend, and look into how this can be done also to, of course, not lower the investment security here around the table. But it stands as it is, and it can be operationalized today under the Article 6.2.
Yeah, well, probably to add on our side, I think that you've raised one of the most important questions for us, because having a legislation in place is one of the key for any government representative, because we have to operate according to existing legislation and the rights that we have. So basically, this is something I've already mentioned in my answer for the first question. When building this legislation, we have to make sure that it's in compliance with our national requirements and legislation already in place. It has to meet the requirements that Switzerland has already in place in terms of legislation. It has to respond the agreement that we have, which can be at some point amended if the decisions are changed. And again, we have to meet the decisions that are taken here. So that's a quite a challenge. And all of the other questions that you've named, they have to be addressed by this legislation. So basically, we're now in a position when we're just starting, and there's a lot of work ahead to make sure that this is all operational.
Yeah, maybe on the additionality, I'm doing this now for like 10 years. It is a very solid work how to prove additionality in the case of investments, because and we will look at it anyways, always the same as Veronica explained. I mean, there is always the possibility to look at a baseline scenario. What would have been what would have been built, or what's the plan, the typical plan to build, and there, I mean, it's the irrespective of if you're rebuilding or not. You look at the available sources of financing and so the structure, and you do an investment analysis, and you compare it with investment standards that you have. And if you can show that this is not working out or not would be working out, then you need more money. You have to make it more viable. And this is exactly where CLIC comes in. And if CLIC can move the needle and make that the project is going forward because of this additional money, then that's a go. And if not, it's a no.
Yeah. Any final reflections from the panel? Olga, Veronica? Okay, so if there are no further questions from the audience, we conclude. Thank you. Oh, we have Oksana. Okay, Oksana has another question.
I have one question to Olga and one to Misha. Olga, if you speak about Ukraine recovery plan, we could see that we need new technology, clean technology. We should be more greener, but it's more expensive, for example, than to change one boiler gas to another. Does ministry plan to create special financial instrument or special fund that to support or technical assist special sectors or municipalities with attract financing for long term? Because right now we need to think that we need long-term projects that to be more sustainable energy security. And for Misha, the question, what about the business? Because business like to return investments as quick as possible. What about paying back period? What about investment, and not only in mitigation project, maybe some part of adaptation project? Thanks.
Yeah, so adaptation, as explained, this does not fall under the scope of the cooperation. So we're really into mitigation. And on business needs investment security to go ahead. And this we only can provide after that we have discussed with the governments how the blueprint would look like. And therefore I was referring to larger structures. We are not in tendency, we would not look at individual boilers, but we would look at a blueprint that is able to streamline the financing of boilers. And then, yeah, that's the way we're looking at it. So it will take a longer period until we have this blueprint, because we do not want to enter into dealing with business before this is not clear, because we would just chase them away.
Yeah. On the fund, you clearly know that in Ukraine, the Ministry of Finance is the one who's responsible for all the money that we have and how we disperse it and where do we get it from. So I would say it's rather a question to the Ministry of Finance rather to the Ministry of Ecology. Our key responsibility is to build the framework and make it happen and make it helpful for business to to submit projects, to work, to implement everything. That is our explicit function that we are responsible for, and this is our task. And any other matters would have to be consulted with the key ministries responsible for this or that question and subject.
Thank you very much. We are going to play a little promotional video at the end, but I'd like to thank you all. Jan Willem has left, but thank you, Misha, Olga, Veronica, and Mikola. Thank you very